We are going to be talking about addressing feeding challenges on the spectrum. I'll start and Jarrod's going to jump in for the last half. I'm going to go pretty quickly because I'd like most of my time to be used to watching the video examples. Some of the most common feeding challenges we see in kids or people in general is going to be that over-selectivity or picky eaters. We've got food refusal where they don't want to eat anything entirely, and then fear or anxiety, big emotions relating to food challenges. So I split these up. The first three are ones that we can address behaviorally. The second three are going to be ones you'll need either an OT or a doctor or someone with more specialization to give you some more input on. So if you've got feeding tube dependence or you've got oral motor issues, there's sensory problems with food, an OT can be a great person for that in your physician. Choking, coughing, and aspiration risk, that's another concern that will be more addressed medically. I put in this little bubble over here that if you fill out a feeding questionnaire, there's some really good ones. It can give you good insight from where to build on because you can identify patterns. So if your child doesn't like anything with a certain texture or that's a certain color, you can figure those out and then build from there and do certain like textural fading procedures where you might blend something all the way and then a little bit less and then a little bit less until they're eating solid foods. Or you can do like things of the same color and do comparisons as far as taste and texture and such. Those are some of the common feeding challenges we see. So if you're going through formal food therapy, they're going to send you through an assessment. That might look like the questionnaire. It's usually like an interview of sorts. Then you will definitely do some probing, which is where you essentially just test to see where your child is in the steps for certain foods. And then you're going to go through a procedure called shaping. You're going to reinforce, you're going to praise and deliver preferred edibles or items for approximations of eating a food. And then you'll go through reinforcement. And data collection can tell us if the problem is getting better. It's really important. It doesn't need to be super formal. A lot of people just use pluses and minuses. You could do smiley faces and frowny faces, just anything where you can see that minutia, that difference on whether or not your child's feeding concerns are being addressed and if you have to make adjustments. So the steps for shaping, we've got touch, then they'll go from touch to hold and pick up, smell, kiss, lick, bite, and then put in their mouth and then consume. Some resources and recommendation add a step before if you can't get the child to touch the food, even just interacting with it. So serving it for yourself, picking it up with tongue. You can do all sorts of weird things to get them to interact with the food if they're really averse to touching the food. When you're choosing reinforcers, you're going to know what your child likes best, but a lot of times it's really naturalistic to use preferred food as a reinforcer. It's really common for most parents and most kids to be like, eat your vegetables and then eat dessert. Or even as adults, I usually am not eating dessert before I eat my main course or my main foods and trying to get what I need for my body first. Also with those preferred foods, it's really important because access can realistically be limited. Some things like iPad time or toys or preferred activities, you might not be able to limit those for food therapy, so they'll lose their value and your kid won't want to go through the food steps to access those things. But if you really like Oreos, you can save Oreos just for that food time. So you're always going to want to pair whatever reinforcement delivery with behavior-specific praise. So I really liked how you touched that carrot. I really liked how you picked up that apple, whatever it is, just so that way they know exactly what they're doing right and what you want to see more of. I have some great videos from another person that actually is interning at Pingree, Riley. She's done an awesome job making some food therapy videos. So I'm going to go ahead and play those for you so you can see what it can look like. This is the first steps. These are the probing steps that you might see to address and figure out what step your child is on for a particular food.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us for our probing how-to video. I've got Kirsten here to help demonstrate. As you can see, we have all the materials that we need. Like I mentioned, it's a good idea to have 2 plates, one to present your target food. In this case, it's carrots. And then another plate in case things get a little bit messy. I'm taking data on my iPad. I'm just using the Probing Trials data sheet. I will upload a screenshot after the end of this video so you can kind of follow along. I'll kind of be talking through how I'm collecting data. Just a reminder, we're going to present all of our commands in a question format with our probing session. So let's get started. I'm going to present the carrot. All right, Kirsten, can you touch the carrot?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Go ahead and put your hands back down for me. Okay. Can you hold the carrot? All right. Okay. All right, Kirsten, can you smell the carrot?
Mm-hmm. I smell it.
Okay. Thanks for having such a calm body. All right, Kirsten, can you kiss the carrot?
No.
Okay, so she was very clearly defined about not kissing the carrot. So that kind of establishes a baseline for us. We know that that's where we need to stop in that sense. So that's the rest of our probing session. Thanks for watching, and hopefully that will help.
All right, and then she kind of goes into what the data collection looked like in her case.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us for part 2 of our probing session, how-to video. We're just gonna go over the data sheet real quick, just because it was difficult for me to show how I was recording data while I was running our little mock session. So as you notice, I fill everything out completely. I wrote her name, the date, and then with a typical probing session, you're gonna have all 3 of these filled out with your target foods. Just for the sake of time, I only ran 1, and we only did just a little bit here. But we were targeting carrots, and if you can think back to our video, she had no problem touching, holding, or smelling the carrots. Therefore, it was not a tough decision about whether she was being compliant or not. So those are all circled Y, because she was, yes, compliant. She was able to engage in the behavior independently. I was using no prompting. I wasn't reinforcing or anything. And then when I asked her to kiss the carrots, she very adamantly was not going to. She said no. She was a little bit whiny. I did wait a second just to see if she would eventually kiss it, and she didn't. So that's where we ended probing for this specific target food, because I knew that's where we were going to have to start our shaping. So just in terms of this client, when you begin shaping, you would just start at kiss and then work your way up until we reach the final approximation, which is ultimately consumption. So I hope these training videos were helpful. If you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to your supervisor.
And then we're going to go into next what a more like food therapy session after this step has been completed.
Hi everybody, thanks for joining us for our shaping session how-to video. I have Kirsten again helping me with this video. We're gonna shape up some carrots. We have everything ready to go. Like I said in the earlier video, it's always a good idea to have 2 plates just in case things get messy or a client spits the food out on the presentation plate. I also have our 10 trials data sheet pulled up on my iPad. Due to Kirsten's cognitive abilities, I'm using the gesture form versus the verbal prompting form. Also, we've talked a lot about token boards and the use of them in our sessions. So we just drafted up a quick little paper token board that Kirsten is going to use during this session. We're going to have 2 reinforcement schedules going at the same time. They're going to be both at the same pace. We're going to do verbal praise on an FR1 schedule along with a token for an FR1. So every time Kirsten is compliant and completes the demand correctly, she's going to be able to color in a token while I also present verbal praise. So Kirsten, you ready to get started?
Yes.
Okay. All right. All right, Keeks. Can you touch the carrot?
Yes.
Great job touching the carrot. Do you want to color in your token board, or do you want me to?
I want to.
Okay. What color do you want? You can choose multiple.
Red.
Okay, go ahead. You can do a different color next time. Hurry and color in that first token right there for you. Kirsten is working on earning iPad time, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, she's got that all colored in. Okay. All right, Kirsten, I want you to touch the carrot.
I don't want to though.
Kirsten, I want you to touch the carrot. Kirsten, I want you to touch the carrot like me. Okay. Good job touching the carrot. All right. Kirsten, can you touch the carrot? Kirsten, can you touch the carrot?
Yes.
Way to go. Okay. Kirsten, touch the carrot. Fantastic job. Here you go. Color in another token. So as you can see, we had to do some prompting. So I made sure to be really differential in my verbal reinforcement. I also did not deliver tokens just because on the first one I had to model, and then on the second one I had to gesture for her to be able to do that. That looks great.
Thank you. I like stars.
Yeah, they're great. Okay. All right. Touch the carrot. Fantastic job. Great job. Okay. There you go. Another token.
Touching carrot.
Token number 3. Oh, I'm so glad you like touching carrots. Okay. All right. Thanks for sitting back down. All right. Kirsten, will you touch the carrot?
No.
Will you touch the carrot? Thank you for touching the carrot. Okay. Hey, I want you to touch the carrot.
No.
I want you to touch the carrot.
Fine. Touch it.
That's better. Okay. Hey, can you touch the carrot? Way to go. That was so great. Here, give yourself another token right there. Okay.
Find it.
All right. Kirsten, touch the carrot.
Why do I have to touch the carrot though?
Touch the carrot.
I touched it.
Okay, there we go. All right, Kirsten, I want you to touch the carrot. Thank you for touching the carrot. There you go. Have another token.
I touched it.
Okay, so as you can see, we dealt with some non-compliance, maybe a little bit of problematic behavior, and like in our presentation, you're just gonna wait a brief period, 3 to 5 seconds, and then represent the demand with the exact same verbiage, working up your prompting hierarchy.
All right, last video, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about it and turn my time over to Jarrod.
Hi everybody, real quick, we're just going to kind of recap what happened in that shaping video. So just for sake of time, and since it was just an example video, we didn't even get through all 10 trials for touch. So she didn't reach reinforcement just simply for time's sake, but I did want to go over our data sheet and what that looked like. So if you notice on the right side of the prompts, I never had to use any physical prompts to get Kirsten to engage in the behavior. So we do have a little bit of a differentiation when we're looking at compliance and what type of prompt we use in the feeding clinic. So unless you have to use a physical prompt, we're going to mark compliance as yes. That's why you see all of my trials, I've circled the Y, even though I did have to use a few gestures and I did have to model once for Kirsten. I never once had to physically prompt her. If a client needs to be physically prompt or they are just being defiant and not engaging in the behavior at all, we're going to mark yes for compliance. So those two situations, if they are defiant and won't engage in the behavior at all, or if we have to physically prompt them, those are the only two instances where we're going to mark circle N for compliance. So with this trial block, I know we didn't reach the full 10. We did 9 trials, but she would have met mastery criteria for this set right here with 9 out of 9 compliance. So hopefully this video helped. If you have any other questions on how to run a shaping session or what your data sheets should look like, feel free to reach out to your supervisor, and thanks for joining us.
All right, awesome. So I wanted to touch on a few things. Riley's awesome. She's a great therapist. She really knows what she's doing. Some of the things that she used that can really help is offering choices at the beginning, being really clear with her directions, and having kind of that visual representation of how much work Kirsten had to complete. So those are all things that you could do at home and set up that can make this behavioral intervention go a little smoother. I also wanted to say that this is a really intense version of food therapy, and it can seem a little bit overwhelming. If your child or client or whoever it is having really hard food difficulties, they might have to engage in something like this. If you just want your child to be willing to try new foods and increase their food exposure, you can do something a little bit less formal, I guess you could say. So I know in my class right now, we have a food of the month, so it does take a lot longer, but we eventually do get most of our kiddos to try the food at the end. And how I do that is we go through the same steps, but I just give them the option at the end of the day every day. Whatever step they're on, I'll be like, hey, you can totally have this piece of candy, have this preferred item, but first I need you to touch the banana, or first I need you to kiss the banana, whatever it is. And after 3 days, I check off whether or not they did it. After 3 days in a row they've done it, we move to that next step, and I kind of up that demand a little bit more. So that's kind of a really casual way, maybe a little less intimidating than all of these steps and this stuff that you can do to increase kind of food exposure and food tolerance for kids. It's time for Jarrod.
Great. Thanks, Alex. So like Alex was saying, it really doesn't have to be formal all the time. You're able to find those data collection sheets if you want to at home, and you can just check mark certain things and stuff like that. So you really don't have to make it super stressful about that experience. And that was one thing, like being at the University of Utah, being an intern there, I've had the opportunity to work at the home eating disorder clinic. And a lot of parents were kind of stressed out sometimes about, when we asked them to take data or we asked them to do it weekly and stuff like that. Sometimes it's just so much easier just to do it kind of more informally for parents, and that's okay as long as you're seeing your kid make progress. That's the most important part for any parent, So definitely doing that. And one thing I want to point out before I kind of get going on my slides too, remember that not everyone likes certain foods. Sometimes we don't like certain foods. So we got to pick those foods that we think are good for our kids, but we kind of have to probe, like we did the probing session on the video, and make sure, our kids aren't going to just hate it consistently over time. Probing and making sure those foods are something that are not adversive to our kids is the most important part as well. There's a few things here on these slides that I wanted to talk about that both kids and parents have a problem sometimes thinking about, and they're called thinking traps. The first one is walking with blinders, and that's only seeing the negative and overlooking the good in a situation. So when we're working with kids and trying to have them eat something, and it can be a very stressful situation, they may not do exactly what we want them to do or anything like that. But maybe they did do just a little bit of positive, look at that situation and be like, that's awesome, let's look at the positive sometimes in those situations and see that silver lining. The other trap that we sometimes look into is the repetitor. If it happened once, it's going to happen again in that way. When we're working with our kids, and trying to have them eat food, different types of foods and stuff like that, maybe, a month ago, they were just so, upset about it. They threw the table, they just threw a huge tantrum, and we don't want to try it again. But you never know, because we're consistently changing as human beings, our taste buds and different things and textures. And so just trying it again and being willing to have that food in front of them and letting them try it once more to see if that happens again, and not being afraid of the situation on that one. And then the catastropher. It says always thinking the worst ever is going to happen. Again, going back to that, we got to think positively about certain things that's going to happen. Just making sure that things run smoothly and hoping for the best in the situation. And then a lot of times, our kids will avoid certain situations and are scary and they don't want to try it for the first time. And that can be for us as adults as well, when we're working with our kids, trying to have them eat different foods. So, not afraid to try new things or trying these different steps that you think, may never work for your kid. Go ahead and try it. See if it works. You may be impressed that these different steps work for your child and that they're able to eat more foods later down the road. And then the mind reader, jumping to conclusions about persons, things, situations without the facts. Why, we want you guys to be able to analyze and see what your kids like, do those probing sessions, gather the facts and everything like that for that situation, and making sure that we don't jump to conclusions. Remember, the next trap is the shoulds. I should always be perfect. I shouldn't be making mistakes. I'm one that likes to be perfect in a lot of things. And it's one of those things I have to think and overcome. And that's one thing that you as parents, should definitely try to do, is remember that you don't have to be perfect at these moments. There's going to be something that happens and you can just shrug it off and be like, okay, let's move on to the next step, or let's try it again another day. It's okay to make mistakes with your child, and your child can make mistakes as well. It's okay. You can come back to it later on. Don't set too high of expectations at first. If you're doing it informally by just learning from this video, don't set those high expectations that your child's going to eat every single food after you do these steps that we laid out for you. Or if you're working with a feeding therapist, take it a step at a time. Talk with your therapist or anyone that you're working with feeding wise, and set those goals that are not too far reaching. When you do that, then you'll be able to see better progress for your child. And you'll be able to be proud of the progress that they're making. And one thing that I like to mention to parents, when I was working with my client beforehand, is make it fun, make it fun for your kid during this experience. It can be a little traumatizing at times and aversive for them, and they won't want to do it. But, like Alex was saying, make it something that they enjoy by getting like a star chart or stickers, or having something that they really enjoy to track their progress, so they can be like, hey, look, Mom and Dad, I got, my star, and I'm like 4 stars closer or something like that to my reward. And, being able to figure out how many, tokens that they require to get that reinforcement. You can kind of, probe at that and see what their limitation is on that, where they may not want to do it anymore. So again, just going back to making sure that they can enjoy it at times. So a good acronym to remember, it's kind of one that will probably stick in your head, because a lot of time we do feel this way, is fear. Are you feeling frightened? Are you expecting bad things to happen? This can be for parents and for kids, depending on how high functioning your child is. You can talk to them or, discuss it amongst your family about attitudes and actions that can help. That positive thinking can really help a child and parents along with it. Monitoring the different anxious thoughts that your child may have and thinking negative thoughts, you can really help them through the feeding process, pushing them along, so that way they can, receive their results and their rewards at the end. And be sure, when they do something that you're working towards, especially if they earn all their tokens or anything like that, give them that verbal praise, give them a high five, give them ice cream, whatever you had for their reward at the end. Make sure that you are just reinforcing them with verbal and physical praise. And there's never too much of that, and they will be so proud of themselves and so happy. And that can really change the way that they think about themselves and the way that they think about this food therapy process, where they're touching and kissing and licking foods and stuff like that. It's amazing to see the progress that you can see by just having that positive attitude about it. And then some facts that people ask: what if my child is not following my directions? You can see in the videos that sometimes there's some questions that you can ask your child, like, will you touch the broccoli? Will you touch the carrot? Sometimes it's better to be more directive with a statement, like, first take 2 bites of broccoli, then you get 1 minute break on your tablet, or you get 1 minute with crayons or whatever they enjoy. Also, there's a thing called a forced choice, is when you provide a choice that's only acceptable options in the scenario. You offer them, would you like to take a bite of carrots, or would you like to take a bite of broccoli? When I was working with my client in the feeding clinic, this was actually a really good thing for him, because it's still something that you want to work towards, but they can pick the one that they prefer more over the other food, and then you can work on that food for a bit, and then you can come back to the other one once the other one's been completed over time. Another question is, what if my child is seeming to be getting worse or regressing over time? They're not doing that. I had this as well in my feeding clinic case, where the child I was working with, was working well with carrots, and actually took a bite of a carrot by himself one time, and then kind of regressed backwards a little bit on that. And that's okay. You might see some regression along the way, but just check in, especially if you're working with a feeding therapist. Are you following the behavior plan? Review those strategies, come up with some new goals that you can work with. And the biggest thing too, a lot of problems is, I know time time can be a factor, but how often are you practicing with your child? It should be at least 2 to 3 times a week if you can do that. It can be, again, very informal if you want to do like a 2-3 minute session, quickly do with them and then get going again with your lives if you can possibly do that. That really keeps them going with that consistency, because I'm sure that you guys know that those with autism really enjoy that consistency in their lives. And then how long do I have to keep doing this? I mean, this really depends specifically if you're working with a feeding therapist or if you're doing it kind of independently. But, be consistent and try to reach the goals that you set for yourself and your child and keep going. And you can fade out the foods that they've really mastered off, but be sure to come back to them later on and provide that reinforcement again for them when they do complete that target food that you came back to after a while, which is, it's called maintaining their behavior on that. And then the last one is, what if you need more support? There's tons of resources, especially on the internet, or if you're working with a feeding therapist, you can reach out to them and talk to them, discuss the problems that you may be having. We have this page for resources for you guys. The place that I worked at was the Neurobehavior Home Program Interdisciplinary Feeding Clinic, which is a mouthful, but it was a great experience where they set you up. They ask for medical documents that you submit and everything like that, and a referral. And then once that happens, you are set up with a feeding therapist who will work with you for, I think it's like an 8 to 12 week program. And if you need it longer, you can always reach out to them. But you meet on a weekly basis, which helps you to make sure you're running sessions and being consistent with your child. And it really helps you to see that progress and to see these steps in motion. And then after a couple of weeks, we actually kind of hand the reins over to parents, and the parents run the sessions, and we're there to support you guys. So that way you guys get the full experience over it. And then if you need any help, you reach out, and it's such a great support for you. If you're interested in that, definitely reach out to them. Google has tons of resources. If you just type it in, feeding disorder solutions, steps for doing it, paperwork for doing it. You can search for like star charts or different things that your kid might like, there's the world out there. Along with YouTube, they've made tons of different videos that can really support you and help you on that. And the last one, I haven't looked into a ton, but I know that there's parent support groups on social media. Facebook typically has a lot of different pages for those with autism and stuff like that. I'm sure if you searched there or on any other social media outlet, you'd be able to find those support groups that can really help you. And you'd be surprised, sometimes you get in that mode where we're thinking we're the only ones that are experiencing this issue, but then you see these posts that are written on Facebook and you're like, wow, there's a lot of other people going through these issues. So those support groups can be really useful for parents and for the kids that they're working with. I encourage you guys, to really look through the presentation and see what things that you can pick out and like from it. Give it a go. Again, if you want to make it informal, just start right away and figure out what your kid likes. You can work with them slowly and build up to different foods over time. Or if you want to reach out to professionals, I encourage that as well. So it's been a great experience for me working in that clinic, and I hope that you guys can really find solutions that you're looking for there.
All right, these are just our references. We can, of course, email or share anything. The feeding clinic manuals are amazing. They're produced by a clinic that Jarrod worked for, and they're really helpful step-by-step instructions and give you a lot more information than we could give you in 30 to 40 minutes.
Thank you so much. That was a really awesome presentation. I appreciate you both taking the time to do that.
Thanks, Lauren.